In 1988, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was everywhere. Now, it wasn't just a movie, this was an event. It was a wild mix of live action and animation that made people believe cartoons and humans could share the same world. And at the time, kids were quoting lines from the movies, Please, Eddie." And parents were shocked by how dark and weird it could get. And studios were watching one thing, the money roll in. So Roger Rabbit was one of the biggest hits of the year. And back in the 80s, that meant one thing. Someone was going to turn this into a video game. And on paper, that sounded simple. All they had to do was take one of the most creative movies of the decade, throw it on the NES, and cash in. But here's the problem. How do you turn a noir detective comedy about cartoon physics and Hollywood corruption into an 8-bit game that actually makes sense? I mean, even if you ran this game as a kid, you probably remember the feeling. You drop into a huge city, no clear instructions, the weasels chasing you, asking you crazy riddles, and no idea what to do next in the game. You just walked around, hoping you'd stumble onto something important. And trust me guys, you weren't alone. Plenty of people today still call this one confusing, cryptic, and just downright maddening. So as we dig into this one, I want you to think about a question. Was Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the NES a smart attempt to capture the magic of the movie? Or was this an impossible game from the very start? This is the story of Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the NES, and the impossible game, how Roger Rabbit tried to capture 1988's biggest movie. Now, to understand this game, we've got to start with the movie. Who Framed Roger Rabbit hit theaters in 1988, and it blew people away. It mixed live action and hand-drawn animation in a way nobody had seen before, and it pulled in big money at the box office, and became a full-blown cultural phenomenon at the time. And for Disney and their partners, that meant they weren't just selling movie tickets anymore. They had toys, shirts, posters, and of course, video games. So let's talk about the movie real quick. And just what the culture was like for this movie. Now, Roger Rabbit back in the day, for me, I remember seeing this one. Like I said, I was probably like 8th or 9th grade when I saw it. And it was just at the time, I mean, this wouldn't be the first to have, crossovers with cartoon stuff. They'd have like, little skits or whatever. But this was the first, in my mind anyway, to my knowledge, a full-blown production of, because they had them back in the day with Walt Disney. If you ever watched the old Walt Disney cartoons, you'd have Walt Disney and he'd be talking to Donald Duck or talking to cartoon characters. They kind of had a segment, but this would be the first one where they cross over. And what made this one extra cool was you had I guess the best way I can call it is not really a dream match, but dream crossovers. Like you had Donald Duck and Daffy Duck in the same movie, actually talking to each other. You had, just big cartoon franchise like that. The Looney Tune and the Disney characters would actually, cross over. And it was actually very cool. And just at the time, it was just unbelievable, And then you had, the characters. You had Eddie Valiant, you had Roger Rabbit. But let's talk about Jessica for a hot minute. I think she was probably one of for young teenage boys, I feel like she was definitely a big selling point and turned a lot of heads for obvious reasons. We're grown ups. We don't need to talk about it. But yeah, what she always say, I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way. Yeah, okay. Yeah. We all felt the way. I mean, it's okay to admit we all felt back in the day some way about Jessica Rabbit. But anyway, what's cool about her was she wouldn't be the first one to be provocative like that, to be drawn that way, like she says. And like I say, if we look at some of the ones back in the day, we had Betty Boop back in. I think she was in the movie as well. But you had Betty Boop. She probably was a pioneer of, I'll just say drawn that way ladies. She was the first one. And then you had, let's not forget the other one from the old Tex Avery cartoons. Probably if you're older like me, you'll probably recognize her, Red Riding Hood.
All the chicks are crazy for a certain burly wolf, a real sharp curly wolf.
If you grew up back in the day, you definitely remember her from back in the day. So she was kind of doing her thing as well. And then I think Jessica Rabbit was the more modernized version of the evolution of the drawn that way women. The best way I could say it is she'd be the final evolution, at least in the 80s anyway. Now over time they had other stuff like Cool World, if you ever seen that movie with Brad Pitt. So yeah, they would eventually have characters like that. Yeah, for the 80s, she was the OG of the 80s as far as cartoon drawn that way women. Yeah, it was definitely, and the culture at the time, I mean, I remember seeing the toys, They had the comic books. They had just, it was on lunch boxes. It was pretty much everywhere. So yeah, that was kind of a phenomenon. When you think of Roger Rabbit, you definitely think of the 80s. Because you had a lot of big things in the 80s. You had this movie, you had Turtles, you had Transformers. I mean, it just was a great time in this for cartoons and toys alike. So, but yeah, that's kind of was as far as I remember the culture of Roger Rabbit going. Now, the NES version wasn't the only one we'd see. That's the one that most of us are familiar with. But Disney's own label, Buena Vista Software, actually published a Roger Rabbit computer game in 1988 for PCs and home computers, like the Amiga, Apple II, Atari ST, and the Commodore 64. It focused on fast action levels that loosely followed scenes from the film. But on the console side, things were a lot different. For the NES, that license ended up in the hands of, you guessed it, who else makes movies? Just think about that real quick. I'm gonna give you guys a second. What company publishes movie games and makes them like crap? I'll give you a second. If you said LJN, you are absolutely correct. LJN, a company that would become infamous for rough, rush licensed games, and the actual development was handled by Rare, no pun intended, for the time. And this is the same studio that would later make Donkey Kong Country and Battletoads, Killer Instinct, and a ton of great games in the future. But we all gotta start somewhere. So you've got this perfect storm. A movie that everyone loves, a publisher known for pumping out licensed games quickly that sucks, and a talented but still rising developer trying to adapt to a complex story in a tiny NES cartridge. And if you're like me, you look at this mix of players in our story here, and you either know it's going to be great or it's going to suck. Now, to be 100% honest with you guys, Roger Rabbit to me, and LJN gets it right. I mean, you got to figure a broken alarm clock is at least right 2 times a day. And this is one of the times where I feel like the game is really not that bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. I mean, what helps it to me a lot is the music and stuff like that. And I have to think that Rare development team had a lot to do with that. LJN doing typical LJN stuff, but I have to think that they did help it along. So this game kind of lives in between those two worlds of being terrible, but still good in a screwed up kind of way. So let's continue with our story. Now, we don't have a full detailed making of the team, but we can piece together a lot from credits and from the era. Now, the NES game was built by Rare and published by LJN in 1989. Designer Tim Stamper, artist Kev Bayless, and composer David Wise all worked on this project. And these names, the ones I just named off, they will become legendary in the 90s. But that's a story for another time. Now, the idea wasn't to make a simple side-scroller. Instead, they went for something closer to a graphic adventure. So you play as Eddie Valiant, with Roger trailing behind you, and Eddie's the only character you can control. They got Roger going along, and he's kind of an accessory in this game. He doesn't really do anything major, just kind of gets you in trouble. There's a couple of parts in the game where he can actually kill you. What I mean by kill you is, if Roger dies, you die. So it's one part, like for example, if you don't answer the riddle correctly, you'll lose a life. If this eagle or bird raven thing picks you up and takes Roger Rabbit away, you'll lose a life. So yeah, and if he gets hit by a car, because cartoons can't die. If you get hit by a car, it kind of slows you down and makes it to where you can actually get caught if you're running from the weasels. But anyway, your main character you control is Eddie Valiant. And you start off exploring a big overworld of Los Angeles, talking to NPCs, collecting items, and hunting down the missing pieces of Marvin Acme's will. And that's the main thing you want to get to beat the game. So from a design point of view, that's actually pretty bold for a movie game on the NES. Instead of the game holding your hand from level to level, you're kind of just dropped into this world and told, figure it out. And this wasn't the first NES game to do that. You get a lot of games that have terrible instructions, but this one was probably by far one of the more ambiguous games. And there are buildings everywhere, clues scattered all around, and barely any guidance on what to do, even when it comes to simple things like how to select your weapons and stuff like that. Now, with all that said though, here's where I respect the devs for this game. I mean, they weren't just trying to make like something super generic where you just jump on the enemies and kill them. They were actually trying to put together a storyline that kind of played homage, or tried to play homage to the movie in some kind of ways. So they did put some kind of thought into the game, even though it was kind of convoluted. If you actually played the game and got to the end, it kind of made sense half-assed with the movie. I don't know. And if you want to go for just, kudos, that sounds fine. But there's a fine line between open-end mystery and I have no clue where I'm going. And this one kind of gives you that second latter part of the sentence I just said. If you play this game for the first time, you have no idea what you're doing. Even if you watch the movie 100 times, you still have no idea what you're doing. And I want to say, I feel like they had ambitions. I just feel like maybe they couldn't fit it all into this one little cartridge. We may never know, but that's just kind of how I'm feeling with it. So let's talk about how this thing actually plays. So you start off in Eddie's office, right? The game doesn't really tell you what to do. No big arrow, no first clues. Just walk into the city with Roger following behind you and hope something important happens or is nearby. So the city is full of buildings you can enter, and inside you find people who sometimes give you clues. Usually if you ask these people, you talk to them, and items are scattered all around and random at times. I mean, you'll need certain ones to progress, but the game doesn't always explain why the games matter. I mean, you can beat this game without using half your items. And on top of that, the world is dangerous. I mean, you die really quick in this game. You get hit by cars. I mean, get hit by a car anyway will kill you pretty much in any game. But other small things like you get hit by toon patrol weasels. If you don't answer the riddles correctly, you just you can get your life drained by random hazards, getting kicked by some boots that just walk by themselves in Toonland, or a stray dog kills you, or a stray cat can kill you, or even a stray rat can kill you. So many players remember the game as brutally confusing with very little direction. And even modern reviews call it unforgivingly cryptic and just infuriating at times. And honestly, they're not wrong. This game can test your patience. Now, one of the cool parts in this game is there's also drive sections with Benny the Cab and a final showdown in Toontown against Judge Doom. And so this is the basic loop of the game. In summary, explore the city, talk to random NPCs, collect items, assemble pieces of the wheel, and make your way to the finale in Toontown. Now here's what I'll talk about. Well, I'll be honest, it feels like it almost seems like this game was so cryptic that it almost wanted you to ask for help. I mean, I don't know. I never called the Nintendo hotline for this one. Me and my uncle did beat this game back in 1989, 1990 time frame. But you definitely had to either look at Nintendo Power magazines, call that hotline, or just because there's no internet back then. There's no Google. You can't Google your phone and say, okay, Google, where do I find the wheel? You can do that now, but back in the day, you had to find everything. And the game, you don't know what object matches what. Like, you'll find cheese that you got to throw down for the rat, and that way you can get the jump boots, and that makes sense. But then other things like, when do I use the jump boots? Because you really don't even necessarily need the flashlight, but you got the flashlight for the caves. It's there. And then like the boxing gloves, I have no idea what to do with the boxing gloves, the pistol. I mean, maybe you can shoot Judge Doom with it. So it almost seemed like the game wanted you to, or was expecting you to ask somebody how to figure this thing out. I mean, it was super cryptic. And I guess the saddest part is there is a detective noir game hidden deep inside this game. It's just buried under a lot of vague hints, trial and error, and a lot of depth and frustration. But underneath it all, I think it's a game that's screaming to get out and tell its story. But I think sometimes it's poor execution with just all the frustrating parts of the game. So story-wise, the game loosely follows the movie. I mean, the setup is simple. Roger's been framed for murder, and Eddie Valiant has to clear his name and recover Marvin Acme's will. So you travel across a 1947's LA, mixing real-world streets with cartoon chaos. And the characters you know from the film show up. You got Roger, Jessica, and finally Judge Doom. And honestly, man, I think they could have gave Jessica some more love. She only shows up on the front of the box, and she only shows up at the end when you're inside the warehouse. Let's be real. Everybody wants to see more of Jessica, even if she's only in 8 bits. So the goal is to gather all 4 pieces of the wheel and make sure Toontown doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And the ending sucks. I mean, it's sucks. Basically, I like the idea of the game. I see what they were trying to do. Now, one thing I will say about the Roger Rabbit, the music in this game, as it's quirky, I'll admit it is kind of quirky, but the music in this game is actually pretty cool. They did a really cool job. And LJN, lots of times the games are shit. I'm not gonna lie. The games, if you played LJN games, they usually suck. But lots of times LJN does get the music right, even if it is based off the movie. Now, I haven't watched Roger Rabbit in years, so I can't tell you exactly what the music sounded like. But the music for the game had some pretty cool tracks. We'll take a listen to a couple. They're just really cool, and they fit the game perfectly. So yeah, in my mind, music-wise, because I still hum that tune. I even made words up for it, but I'm not gonna do that because I can't do that. But anyway, yeah, I was that much of a nerd that actually made words to that theme in Toontown. So yeah, But and don't look at me like that. I know you guys got a lot of weird stuff you've done in the past with video game music. Well, anyway, but I say all that to say the music in this game to me was kind of dope. I ain't gonna lie, it was pretty good. But I think one of the main takeaways from this game was you don't really think about the personal bond with Eddie and Roger or any of the characters. You kind of just remember getting lost in it. Does that make any sense? If you played this game before, does that make any sense? Anyway, the NES version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit released in 1989, about a year after the film and the original computer game. That meant it arrived right when the movie's hype was still fresh in kids' minds. So if you saw that box at a rental store with Roger on the front cover and Jessica, you knew exactly what it was. You didn't have to guess. But here's where things get interesting. This wasn't the only Roger Rabbit game out there. In 1988, the computer game came first. That version, developed by Silent Software and published by Buena Vista, focused on 4 distinct levels: driving Benny, searching the Ink and Paint Club, racing to the Gag Factory, and finally the showdown using gag items. And it was more of a traditional action game with clear stages. Now the NES, on the other hand, that was kind of its own beast. It's not a straight port of the computer game. It changes the structure completely into an open world detective format. And later, a Game Boy adaptation arrived in 1991, again under the Who Framed Roger Rabbit name. And that version kept some of the same ideas, but actually reworked them for a handheld play, with larger character sprites and chapter-based levels. And some people even found the Game Boy version more fun and more focused than the NES one. And you also had something very 80s-like, or of its time, the NES manual, and it included a real phone number you could call for in-game hints. Back then, that was a cool little piece of immersion. Call Jessica Rabbit to get tips. Tips, that's it guys, you just get tips, you don't get to talk to her. Now critically, the game never became a classic. Even to this day, Roger Rabbit is not a classic. And some reviewers and fans have praised its graphics and music, but many slammed the confusing structure and lack of guidance. And most modern reviewers or modern retrospective reviewers, they kind of file it under frustrating movie games, but they're not alone, and they lump that into the other scrap of other LJN movie titles that have been made in the past. So let's talk about the legacy and influence. So where does Roger Rabbit on the NES set today? Well, it's not a widely loved classic. I mean, you don't see it on many top 10 NES games lists, but it does show up a lot when people talk about weird, rough movie games, and we talk about LJN's history as a publisher. And for collectors, maybe it's a neat snapshot of a moment in time where the movie industry and the game industry were still figuring out how to work together. Not like today with Spider-Man and, Miles Morales and Spider-Man movies and all the movie crossovers they got, Marvel Universe and everything else. Back in the day though, we were still trying to be the pioneers and figure that out. For fans, it's a strange half-remembered rental, and God forbid if you bought it, that might have driven you nuts back in the day. But for Rare, it was one small step on a long road that would later lead to some of the most beloved games of the 90s. So what I think about Roger Rabbit? It was a tough one, guys. I remember renting this game back in the day, and I rented it once, and then I actually swapped for a buddy of mine. A buddy of mine traded games and gave me Roger Rabbit. I forgot what I gave him. I didn't actually buy this one. I remember playing the game and being kind of confused because it doesn't really hold your hand in this game. It doesn't really tell you where to go. You kind of just got to figure it out on your own, and it can be unforgiving because what made it hard for me. Now, I traded with a buddy. It was cartridge to cartridge, so back in the day, that was one of the downsides of you not buying your own game. You never got the instruction book. You might, if you're lucky and the guy was cool, he might give you the black sleeve it came in, or the box, which I've never had that happen before. Anytime I've ever traded with a buddy, I just get the arcade game or get the cartridge, put it in my pocket, head out, and we meet up at the store. I go to his house, something, and we just trade the game and move on, or bring it to school. So I don't know anybody who really traded with me and gave me the instruction book. Now I say that to say, when I played this game, I had no clue what I was doing. You just had to, for example, when you play this game, to change your weapons or change what your items, you have to hold down select and then up and down on the buttons to use your stuff and something. And then if you can't, it didn't tell you how to really punch. I mean, you have to hold the punch, keep pushing the punch button. You can move around and stuff like that. And at the end with Judge Doom, I mean, you have to keep punching them down. And there are limited continues in this game. This game can be challenging. Not so much for the difficulty, but just all the stupid stuff that can happen in the game. Now, I will say the music in this game was on point. Like I said, it had a lot of good tracks. And then the music would slow down and speed up if the weasels got close. You had the car chases when you were driving the Benny the cab. So it did, out of all the LJN games, this one did show some promise. I can say this is probably one of the better LJN games. Would I recommend you playing it? Only if you're in for a lot of abuse and you have a guide that walks you through the game. To try to figure this out on your own, yeah, it's gonna take you about a week, maybe a week and a half. But if you got a guide for it and you're just nostalgic with some Roger Rabbit, yeah. So, but other than that, I really don't see you having to dig this one out and play it. Just watch somebody on YouTube or as a playthrough if you're really interested or you never beat this one as a kid. But I will say though, the music was good, and as far as LJN games, this one ranks higher than most. I mean, I probably give this one maybe a 7, just for the creativity. And I feel like if Rare and LJN would have had a bigger platform to work with, I'm not saying that we need a modern day Roger Rabbit, but if they had more of the platform, more to work with, or maybe even cut some of the game down and made the game make sense, it actually might have been a pretty good game. My opinion. I know a lot of people hate this game. My opinion, I feel like was a small, I feel like there was some actual fun parts of the game. They actually did have like the riddles and stuff. That was pretty cool. And the car driving the cars were pretty cool. And the Judge Doom fight was actually pretty cool. So it wasn't a total bust, but so that's gonna do it for Roger Rabbit, guys. But let me know in your comments, did you ever beat this one? Did you ever play this game before? Did you like it? Did you like the music like I did or whatever? So yeah, but let me know your experience with the game in the comments below. I mean, yeah, I'm curious to know what you guys thought about this one, because this was definitely a quirky game, if you will. It was definitely something for the ages back in the day. And let me talk about the movie real quick, as far as how I think it paralleled with the movie, because back in the day, the movie was huge, and you know, a lot of people, and I think that's what helped this game out, just the fact of, you know, people's love for the movie and just the innovations it had at the time. So yeah, I think that kind of played off with that, and I feel like they tried with the best they could. So if the movie didn't come out, this game probably would have never got a second look from anybody. It was just generic characters. Imagine the characters without reference to the movie. This game would have sucked, my opinion. Still would have had cool music though. That's gonna do it for this one, guys. And as always, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace. God bless you. Thanks for watching. Catch you next video.